We will go ahead and call our work session to order. I thought we were connecting to the presentation. That's why I was like, we can get started. And the first discussion item that's listed is the budget update. And I'm assuming Superintendent Degner, you're going to start us off. I know we've been waiting on the presentation to pop up.
Trying real hard here with the tech. Just ask you guys to pull it up. Who's trying to do it? Kurt?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Why is it not connecting? Let me know if you want me to try, Kurt.
It starts to
Somebody's in.
Somebody's in.
Maybe.
the Apple device.
Okay.
There we go.
Yay.
All right.
Good?
I was going to just like
Okay. All right, okay, good evening. We'll officially start here. We got some slides up on there. Of course, it's attached to the agenda so you guys can follow along. Tonight we wanted to talk to you some more and provide some further updates around the district's finances. On the second slide here, this is where we'll end also this portion of the presentation for tonight. So you see kind of some scheduled meetings here for the next 3 weeks after this evening's meetings and some of the plans and for those meetings. Of course, open to your feedback and want to make sure that we're all walking forward in the same manner about those different topics. On February 24th, the idea would be a presentation of preliminary ideas for reducing the next fiscal year's budget, a recommendation for the short-term borrowing that we do believe we'll come back to, but after talking to the lender this week is likely going to need to be on March 3rd at a special board meeting. And then a timeline for some of the operational action plan improvements that we talk about with you this evening. On March 3rd with that special board meeting, we'd be looking at a further discussion of those budget reductions that are initially introduced to you on the 24th. We would then have a proposed recommendation for those reductions as well. Really on the 24th looking at ideas and then coming back on the 3rd about what we would propose for your consideration. And then finally, that recommendation and action item for a short-term $3 million loan to have your action for on the special board meeting on the 3rd. And then finally, on March 10th, we would be asking you to consider some action for budget reductions for the next fiscal year. And then, of course, we'll talk more about these pieces as we go through tonight. But tonight's area of focus, we really have kind of three big pieces we want to talk to you about. First, how we got here. Second, what our borrowing needs are as we understand them today. And then the third would be immediate next steps for consideration. So the first goal of tonight, like I said, is to talk about how we got here and really just some accountability around the situation that in retrospect, jumping to the data last week might have seemed a little bit like a deflection, but I think really the approach or the intent of that approach was to make sure we could explain to you where the dollars were and how they could be accounted for as we traveled throughout this current fiscal year. As always, we want to meet the needs of our students. We know that's critically important for our kids. But we do have to achieve that goal while staying in our financial limits. I think that's a reality we all know and understand. It's something that we have to do a better job of holding to. Because really, in simplest terms, that's what's happened. We went beyond our limits with the things we've tried to do and the services we've tried to provide for our students. We are in a limited resource environment, and we have to continue to do a better job of managing that financial picture with this reality. And so I'm saying I have to take a better responsibility for managing that financial picture in our district and the recommendations that our team brings forward to you. And it's also now my job and our job to make sure that we address that and we fix that moving forward. and put us on a better path to financial stability for the district.
Can I ask a quick question about the accountability piece? So, we've already talked about the authorization. We did not get the authorization. So that's a separate issue. But what I want to know is why 6 months ago, when a $10 million loan was taken out, that the loan document itself, which had our board president's name on it, why that wasn't communicated to the board. And because for me, that's something that would have triggered red flags for me, that there is something off with the financial health of our district. And so, for me, it seems like common sense that you would tell the board, or at least tell the board president, whose name is on that document, that there is a $10 million loan. That's not small change. So can you answer why the board was not notified at the time that the loan was taken out? Is there anybody that can answer why the board was not notified about a $10 million loan?
Sure. Maybe we'll just go to that next slide, just so it's up as the backdrop as I respond to your question there, Director Finch. So the way it was presented to me was as a normal course of action. And so the information that I received, there was no need for board approval, and that we had received confirmation from the state to that effect. Now, in hindsight, of course, I wish I would have verified that information, and I acknowledge I should have done that, and that should have been a step that occurred. But unfortunately, that did not.
So board approval is different than board notification. Even if the board didn't need to approve it, why would you not notify the board about a need for a $10 million loan?
Yeah, again, I would say that my understanding was it was a temporary stopgap measure. We relied on inaccurate and incomplete information, honestly. I'm not sure, I don't recall a conversation about the size of the loan at the time. And to the best of my ability, I received that information, thought it was a normal course of action. Board approval wasn't required. We had confirmation from the state. And so perceiving it as a normal course of action, we just proceeded. And then I think what we learned as we traveled through the months here, as you can tell, even in that December first quarter report, it indicates that there's a healthy amount in our insurance fund. And so when I would have looked at those reports, there would have been nothing to alarm me for the size or scale or scope of the loan. Really, when we got to January and Alan came and asked for the interest rate on the loan at that time, I think that's when we better understood, again, the size, scale, and scope of the loan that was there.
And maybe this is something we need to come back to, but what I'm really wondering is, what do we need to put into place so that something like that doesn't happen again?
Sure, and I think that's a great question. And honestly, in January, when we reviewed those docs, that would have been the first time I had seen that the board president's name was on a document like that, or that our staff member's name would have been on a document like that. I do think there's ways we could work with our financial institutions for a certain amount of money to be moved. It maybe requires additional signatures beyond just one person's signature. I'm not a signer on our accounts, but it could be an assigner on the account, and then the board president, for example.
Because I just can't believe, comments, like if my husband took out a $10,000 loan with my name on it and didn't tell me for 6 months, we would be divorced. I just can't believe that someone would take out a $10 million loan with the board president's name on it and not even bother to tell the board. I cannot believe that happened.
And in reading those documents, my name is listed as the institutional officer.
Right.
So I'm just listed, but not as a signer, and it looks like just one person authorized that. I just want that for clarification, that was news to me as well when those documents were sent out.
Right. The other piece I remember from those documents, it mentions a signature wasn't even required, right? That if we were an existing customer, a signature wasn't required for the movement of those funds. And so it does have a place for the signature lines, but that's a note on those documents.
Was that the CFO who signed it?
Yes. Well, there wouldn't have been a signature, remember, because a signature wasn't required.
I mean, here, it strikes me, remember when we didn't used to pull out big things from Appendix 9? Yeah, right?
Right.
And it seemed crazy, right?
Yeah.
Because
Mhm.
sometimes there would be, what, $100 million
Right.
in Appendix 9?
Right.
And two, right, like, it's common sense, like, hey, maybe if we're going to spend $100 million on something, we shouldn't bury it in Appendix 9,
Right.
which is not accessible.
Yep.
And we should pull it out. And so I think the fix is something like that, right? Like, we have to make a clearer policy that says, listen, and I don't think 10 million is the bottom. Do you know what I mean?
No,
Like,
no, yeah.
like, I think
Yeah.
it's a lower number, but I think we as a board, we have to make clear that, hey, if XYZ is going to happen, even though you don't, maybe it's routine, or maybe you don't need board, whatever, we, as a board, demand transparency.
We absolutely need to know.
And we absolutely need
Yeah.
to know. And I think we've had a couple Appendix 9 hiccups, but I think for the most part, we are all on the same page with
Yeah.
that, and I would hope we could be on the same
And
page.
that's why I
moving forward.
proposed that policy
Yeah.
for Appendix 9.
Yeah,
Yep.
no, and I think
Yep.
that was a really good policy.
Yeah,
Jane.
yeah,
Yeah,
thank you.
I think
Yeah.
that helps a lot, and it's not just for us.
Mhm.
I think it's really important, the Appendix 9 policy for the community.
Right, absolutely, yep.
And I think this is the same thing, right? We have to know,
Mhm.
but I think the community has to know, too.
I have another question kind of along, for the similar purpose, just on the December 2025 note. Just for clarification, it says there was indication that funds were still in a $10 million CD. It's not clear to me what that really means and why that would be reassuring. So I wondered if somebody could explain that for just the community as well.
Yeah, I think, well, like Director Finch's question, is a good one, right? If it was $10 million, we hope that would raise a red flag, that we would say, hey, there needs to be an additional process step here. And so again, trying to recall any conversations, we've looked through any documentation that would provide some evidence of that. If there was anything we had missed on that end, and we can find no indication of any of those things. So I think to your point, Director Martin Frazier, would be when we would have looked at a quarterly report produced to us that showed the insurance fund with $10 million of investments and about $4 or $5 million in the bank, nothing would have alarmed us there that the insurance fund was not sufficient or was not made whole at that point. And so, yes, again, a transfer was talked about as a normal course of business, but at the same time, the size, scope, and then what we found in January with what was left to still do to make that insurance fund whole, obviously problematic, right? It's a much different picture than what we were painting in December.
So was the December report just wrong?
Yes.
Okay.
Who put together who put together the December report?
That would have been the past CFO. Kurt delivered it. If you go back and
Yeah.
look at the meeting minutes or the video, he offers that the former CFO had put that together. He presented that evening since that person was no longer with us.
And then I have one question about the January, the interest rate piece. So my very limited understanding is that there are state officers, officials who set yearly or annually the interest rate for inter-fund loans. Is that, so my question is, it's surprising that you would get to January and need to request the interest rate for that it would not be known at the time, because my understanding is there's a policy annually set, but I'm not sure if my understanding is correct.
And Alan, I don't mean to speak for you, but I think when Alan came across this, what was the problem was there was no interest rate attached to it.
Okay.
And so to make a repayment, there needed to be an appropriate interest rate attached to it. And that's kind of when we started searching, right?
Okay.
And said, okay, well, there was no board action on this item, so there's no interest rate. And then, so you're talking kind of about then what would be the process to establish that interest rate. The problem was at the time there was no interest rate that had been calculated and attached to the loan.
Thank you.
President Rowe. I just want to say that I am not terribly terribly wanting to concentrate upon the timing of notification to the board. The board were eventually notified of these transactions by the superintendent.
I did.
No,
disagree.
why that matters is, so I'm
Why?
sorry, yeah.
My name was on it, so I'm
understand
concerned that that occurred and I wasn't notified because having it potentially be misconstrued that either I knew about it, I signed for it, I talked to the person that withdrew it. I would have liked to known, since I am listed as an institutional officer, so then that information can be shared with the board. That's a concern.
Absolutely, and if the board had been clued into this 6 months ago, we could have started this process instead of this chaotic mess that we're dealing with right now. If the board had an understanding that our financial health was not what we assumed it was, we could be talking about these budget reduction steps a lot sooner. We could have made budget reductions for this academic year, which is now, that's water under the bridge. We're unable to make any adjustments for this year because it's too late for that. Timing is key. We should have known about this in August.
I understand your viewpoints. I'm trying to express my own viewpoint as a member of the board, if you don't mind.
I mean, I respect what you have to say, Charlie, but I fundamentally disagree with it because right now, kindergarten registration is March 4th, or March 5th. Which day is it? 4th or 5th?
4th.
So we're having this happen at a time where parents are doing their school choice and whether they're going to use our school district or not. And if we cannot provide the trust and transparency as a school district and as a board for them to feel confident in using our schools, we're not in good shape. I mean, the thing for me is that, and I spend a lot of time with a lot of teachers. They're my friends. And I don't really spend a lot of time, I spend my Tuesday nights with administrators. But I have friends that they teach in this environment, and they are asking me, will I have food on my table next year? Will I have insurance? And paraeducators too. And it's scary, but we can go, I think it's worth rehashing the past, but if we had 6 months to plan, we're not adding on to FTE throughout the year. Whether it is a classroom teacher here, a paraeducator here, a person in the CFI here, like there are adjustments that we could make. But for me, it's like, I just want to provide the trust and transparency to the community so that they have faith in our classrooms.
So,
Again, I understand
Yeah.
I understand your expression. I would like time to express my ideas also. From looking at everything that I see in the reports we've been given, it's not clear to me that we could have made a different set of decisions that would address the situation in which I understand what you were mainly asked to do was to add teachers and paraprofessionals for the learning environments in various schools and various groups of students. And well, in retrospect, I can say, well, I would have made a different set of decisions. And personally, I'm not clear about that, and I'm not convinced of that. So I think the thing that strikes me is to focus on how we can continue to address, or we can continue to address those academic and instructional needs that you were being asked to meet as we go forward here. And to me, that's what I'm really interested in doing.
So the thing I'd say is, just kind of following up the points Director Lingo and Director Finch are mentioning. Again, it's my responsibility to make sure that the board processes are followed, and that did not happen here, right? Because we would have also, if we'd asked the right question, or if we had had more information about this, or if we had followed that board process, again, we would have made different structural decisions throughout the year too. We would not have existed in the environment we did for that period of time. And so you're all right. Now it's put us against a really short timeline with we're lacking some good options moving forward. And so there would have been an opportunity potentially to do some different things. I think some of the things Director Easton's pointing out, we may not have had the ability to affect much outcome on, right? Like maybe paras, right, as they're committed through the IEP process. But there are other staffing decisions. I think we would all like to be able to go back to that scenario and think, okay, if this is actually going to serve as a cash reserve for us throughout the year, we have a lot of different planning we need to do, rather than, again, kind of where I started the conversation tonight, thinking it was a normal course of business and it was just a timing issue. It wasn't just a timing issue, right? It's a sign of an overall structural problem that we have, and that's what we're working to address now. But we did lose time, right, in being able to address that. I think we need to be honest about that. And again, I take responsibility that didn't get followed. That's my job, that's our team's job, to make sure you guys are aware of those things and that occurs. And so, again, I wish I had known more. I wish I would have asked different information. I wish we would have had accurate information. But the reality of where we are now is also, an important part of the conversation for tonight. But I sure appreciate your questions, and I definitely understand, the frustration and the feedback on that. And I think it's all valid in that sense. So happy to answer any other questions on this one, or transition to the next, but I don't want to rush to the next slide if we still have more thoughts here. So understanding how we got here, which is somewhat linked to or directly linked to what we were just talking about with the timeline of events from the fall to January. And this is a little bit of a follow-up of Director Finch's question last week as well. When we were talking about our reports and, what do we look at in our reports and how do we go through those different quarterly financial reports, or the district financial health report, or if we're looking at our comprehensive financial model, the one that shows you the UAB at the bottom and how we monitor the progress of that. I think it's, again, the theme of, we had incomplete and inaccurate data that we were making decisions on. And so our job has to be to make sure we're providing you with that accurate and complete information, that I'm getting provided that Chase is getting provided that our leadership team is getting provided that complete and accurate data. And that's been a miss for us right now. I think we just need to acknowledge that. It's been pointed out to us in those quarterly financial reports. And some of the reasons for that include some of the other bullet points you see here with lack of sufficient internal controls. One of the ones that's been highlighted to us through that audit process was the bank reconciliations. That's a major piece of work that we have to take on right now. As we get into the loan conversation here later, that is critical for us to be able to qualify for those types of situations. So I'm going to talk to you about an action step with that later. But I think acknowledging those internal controls need some major review and some work done on them. The insufficient financial reports, I think, is another one for us to continue to think about and try to get some outside expert advice on about what is timely, what is relevant, how can we, again, have assurance in the data of what's provided to us. It would seem like now a quarterly report probably isn't sufficient, that something on a more regular basis is something we're going to need to pay attention and monitor on a more frequent basis. And so again, what's that kind of look like throughout the system, right? What's the leadership team look like? What's the superintendent's office look like? What's the board table look like for the community in that regard? And then finally, kind of this misalignment between the HR and finance systems, the lack of position control. This has looked different during my time in the district, whether superintendent or as a central office administrator or building principal, about what our system for this is. At one time, we tried to implement a enterprise resource system, and ERP is what we all called it in the office, and it did not get off the ground successfully. It was never fully implemented. But we need to understand how our HR decisions or our staffing decisions, what that looks like in the numbers when we get to our budget, and how that washes through the budget to understand the financial impact of those decisions. We all need to be in tune to that. Again, kind of those multiple levels of the organization, understanding that if we commit to a level of RAM, then what is that going to look like in the bottom line of our budget? So the result of course, not having sufficient controls in those areas is our expenses outpaced our projections, right? And now we're spending more than we had anticipated, we're spending more than we have reserves for, and we are going to have to make some different decisions moving forward.
When we are talking about changing the financial reports and how the information is getting reported to the board and doing it more frequently than quarterly reporting, one of the things that's going to be important for me to be able to keep track of that I would really like to see is our budgeted expenses, maybe by month, but then our actual expenses and on the same, so that I can say, all right, well, we budgeted this month that we were going to spend $12 million, right? And here we are at 11.5, so we're okay. Or we're at 15, or we're at 12.1, so maybe we're a little over, but at least I, as a board member, can get a monthly sense of the district's overall health. And if we're over, I'm going to be interested in, those 100 to 900 codes. Where are we over? That's going to help me keep a better track and understanding on our financial health and where we might be going astray. And if we get that on a monthly basis, I think all 7 of us are going to be able to have a better real-time sense. Because I know a lot of our budget is projected, and that's what makes me nervous is their estimates of the future, and I think we need to do a better job of keeping track of our real-time monthly expenditures.
Agreed.
Can you give me a better idea about what is happening right now between HR and finance? What does that look like? That communication there?
Yeah, so right now it would be meetings between the groups to talk about here's the staffing decisions we made, and then the finance team or the business team looking at those decisions and having a conversation really about if that's something we can afford or not. Obviously that's not sufficient. In the past we've tried to do some paper sign-offs between the two to say if a position was added here, HR is aware of it. If a position's added here, then business is aware of it. I think we brought those probably more of an aggregate conversation at this point to understand, but you can imagine the flow and even some of these things that we'll show you here in the data in a couple slides, Director Finch, that paras come in frequently, right? I mean, that's going to be a high number, a high turnover, high volume circumstance that again, we have somebody in our HR office that had talked about a data point where we're using for projections being picture day data versus maybe January data and the difference in those months. And so I think we need to acknowledge what we're doing is sufficient, and we need to have some help in determining what exactly that could look like, whether that is, again, is that a system, a software piece that can help us do that? Is there just there's probably both. It's probably some software we need, and then also some better structures in our organization, is how that works between the people as well. So this next few slides are some information you guys have seen somewhat previously before, and then a little bit of an extension from some questions asked about at a previous meeting that shows kind of expenditures that we saw in 2025, and then expenditures we're seeing in 2026, and the increase to those and the percent increase, which obviously went well beyond again, what we had projected, what we authorized, what we expected to incur. And then the next slide does the positional change in the amount.
Superintendent Degner, can you go back to the last line?
Sure.
One of the questions that I can't get past, and I don't know if I will get past it, is that there's a slide last week that was similar to this that showed the increase in salary expenses year over year, where it showed 9% every month. Like, how did we go for the months, that many months in a row, with our payroll being 9% over again and again? Like, I mean, as some people have reached out to me, they've said every HR and accounting software gives you a comparison of payroll year over year if they've made enough widgets in there. Like, how do we go from, I just, like, that for me is a real big sticking point, so can you help me understand that?
Yeah, well, it's not okay, right, is the first thing I'd say. I mean, I think that's what you're recognizing. That quarterly report we would have delivered to you in December would have had one significant payroll month in, and that would have been September. I think looking back, of course, that should have alerted us at that point that September was higher than what we would have expected.
So nobody's looking at payroll, like the month is completed and they're not looking at the money out and the money out that month. October's over, we've been through 2 pay cycles. Now, can we compare October to 2025? Nobody's doing that.
I would say that, yeah, that would go back to that system alignment between the two, that, okay, if we've made some staffing decisions there, then what's the conversation back once we're seeing payroll go out the door? And so that goes back to this whole internal controls conversation, that obviously we don't have the right structure in place that is addressing that gap, but that's a gap that we need to make sure we address. Again, if we had been done doing that analysis, or that conversation would have flowed up, then we would have started making some different decisions. So again, the next one's the FTE. It's also accompanied with a slide after it that shows a little bit more context to the position changes that you're seeing in there. So you see the overall change that's presented. And then if you go to the next slide, that accounts for kind of the makeup of those larger numbers, particularly because of some of the special education impact. I think another miss for us as we look at this would be not fully and we talked about this some last week, not fully understanding the impact of the stress it would put on our cash position, that while it might not have negatively impacted our spending authority or unspent authorized budget, because we are able to recoup those costs for special education, that cash flows much later by the time we're able to levy for it and receive it. And so even though those increases can be categorized into one of those categoricals like special ed, it still put, of course, some greatly increased pressure on our cash position. And then you see some other positions in there that were also just additions we made right around elementary classrooms, again, to the need of trying to meet the needs of our students, but at the same time, we have to do that in the financial limits that are put upon us. And so that's some additional in-depth information there about positions that would have been added either in the spring or even as we got to the fall.
So can we go back to the expenditures exceeded projections slide number 7? Are those annual comparisons or year-to-date comparisons?
Those are
Annual, right?
Annual.
Annual comparisons, okay, thank you.
On that slide, support staff salary, is that the same as support staff that's referred to on the next 2 slides?
Right.
Okay.
I just want to double check, because I keep seeing the preschool teachers, and I've been told time and time again that it would not affect the general fund. Is it affecting the general fund? Or if
It's
general fund-
affecting the cash position of the general fund. It's not hurting our authority, again, on those 2 different concepts we've talked about, but of course, it's increased stress on the general
Okay.
fund cash position. What we don't have up here tonight is, a conversation around BASP. We've talked about BASP, but I think in reality, that's a follow-up point we need to circle back to, just knowing that if we're going to take on, again, more employees, then that's going to be a cash pressure point for us. So basically, any money that's flowing out the door is something we're struggling with right now, even if it doesn't negatively impact our authority.
So of the 9 million addition to the sped deficit that we added this year, that, of course, that if we had that 9 million, like, tried to pay that out of the general fund, we couldn't, because we would have had a negative UAB for the year, right? Because we don't have a UAB that exceeds 9 million. So the 9 million that was added to the sped deficit, how much of that is preschool costs?
We'd have to calculate. Yeah, we could calculate that. We would go back to, preschool teachers, the portion that's charged as special ed, and then also the portion of the paras that would be charged to that. Again, it's hard to look at it in isolation because it was a solution for one problem, right? It's a solution on the authority problem, to your point, that if we hadn't had that big of a spike, we'd have probably seen some cuts sooner, in a sense, because we would have been in a much more difficult position that way. But it did increase the pressure on the cash, for sure.
Oh, sorry. I want to just make an important timing distinction, though. The the 8 million increase was from FY '24 to '25, and preschool, and Nick, correct me if I'm wrong, the larger preschool expansion was actually to this year. Correct.
Yes.
And so that's while preschool could have been a part of the whole solution, the actual preschool increase is in the current fiscal year, not the FY '25, where it went from 10 million to 18 million.
Well, when did we transition to preschools at every school? That was the year prior, right? The school year.
This year.
This year was?
Yeah.
Okay.
So, to your point, we'll have, that'll obviously impact our special ed deficit. Again, we're paying those people, we're seeing the results of paying those people right now.
Did we just not have an idea of our cash balance at the beginning of the year that pushed it? Because, I mean, this is strategy, right? Or it should be a budget strategy that you push your special ed balance at an increment that you have the cash flow to cover it. Right? Or am I wrong on that?
No, you're not wrong.
Okay. But I mean, within reason, if someone has a paraeducator that gets written in an IEP, you have to do it. But
And the goal would be you'd have a sufficient cash reserve to strategically make those investments, right? That you'd have a cash reserve, you'd be able to say, we're going to eat into maybe what that balance looks like. But again, we'd go back to, the inaccurate data we were working with, and that's what has to get improved. You look at our district financial health report that some of you have asked me about, and it shows cash on hand for a period of time. That wouldn't be an alarming number, right? I mean, the 45, I think for, maybe it was FY '24 on one report, and then FY '25 showed up to 70 days, or it might even be the 25 to 26 number. That wasn't correct. And so if we'd had that much cash on hand, we could have weathered, some of these commitments.
And the incomplete, inaccurate data that you keep referring to is the, essentially our journal entries not being up to date.
That's a contributing factor for sure. That, we're going to talk a little bit more about in the borrowing section, but I think it's also in the production of reports, again, that get presented up to the leadership team and then in turn to the board. And so when we talk again about systems and structures for those internal controls, we need to build systems and structures that are reviewing that data and making sure that that data that's getting presented up is accurate. Otherwise, we're all working with bad information to make decisions.
And I just want to make sure I understand this. To me, there's two different, really distinct problems. The special ed costs relate to our cash flow. And because we're allowed to spend that money, we just don't have the cash to pay those positions right now because we have to go to the SBRC, they have to allow us the state supplemental growth, and that takes like 18 months to get approved. So all of our special ed costs are contributing to cash flow, but we have the authority to spend that money, correct?
Correct.
What's contributing to the budget problems are the non-special ed costs. So when I see on this slide that 6 paraprofessionals aren't special ed, those 6 paraprofessionals are contributing to the budget issue, or the 11 FTE for class size reductions. That's a budget. Those are in the budget pool, not the cash, and they contribute also to the cash flow, but in a different way.
If we have to pay interest on the money we have to borrow to pay their salary.
Absolutely. That's another budget, for that loan, absolutely. But if we had the cash, like if we didn't have to, then that's not a budget. We're not overspending with special ed.
I think ideally, to what Director Lingo was talking about, we all would have had a better understanding of our cash position, and we would have been able to then make those decisions in a more organized fashion, right? Because I think, like you're saying, that we probably could have still made decisions to move forward, and would have had to on the special ed end. You could have reasoned that the preschool end, we know we're going to eventually get those some of those cash dollars back, but decisions around the 11 FTE for class size reduction, for example, we would probably have evaluated that differently, right? You probably would have evaluated a lot of these pieces somewhat differently, understanding that information. So Short-term borrowing, our current need as we understand it today, what we'll be asking you to consider in your support of would be a $3 million short-term loan in March of 2026. This is what I talked about at the beginning with the March 3rd meeting. This would allow us to maintain a reserve during that period of time, and we would target quickly repaying that loan in April of 26. It's obvious now we have extremely limited reserves. We are currently trying to limit spending through the end of the year, as we talked about. Yes, it would have been nice to have the whole school year to make those decisions. That's what we're actively doing now. If we have some staff positions that we don't need to fill the rest of the year, or if we have some operational changes we can make as we travel through the end of the year, we're of course trying to do that to relieve pressure on our cash position and then also account for our authority. If you go to the next slide. Yeah, sure.
I guess I don't understand, why a $3 million loan just for a month? I mean, what?
Yep.
Oh, okay.
I'll show you next.
Okay, sorry.
Yeah.
You were going to do it.
Yeah, that's all right. No, it's a good question, yeah. And I'm going to let Kurt kind of walk through this slide that he put together here, and it shows, it gives you a good picture of our cash position and why we would feel better with the $3 million loan.
Yep, so this is roughly taking a 2-week look at our cash position getting to the end of April, right? So what we've continued to talk about is we want to get to that April property tax receipt, and so this is a route we feel confident in. And so the top, very top line is our opening cash position, and then we have revenue projections and expense projections. You can see we're projecting payroll expenses around 16.6, almost $7 million over the whole month. Our bigger payrolls at the beginning of the month. We get our state aid payment. The state releases it on the 10th. It typically hits our bank somewhere between the 14th and the 17th. And so when you have a payroll that's always on the 15th of the month, that timing gets a little hairy at times if you're cash strapped, right? And so that's why we're taking a 2-look week at it, or every 2-week look at it. You can see the total expenses. We're projecting about $3 million on average in non-payroll expenses. And then you can see our net change in position overall, again, where those receipts come in and where those expenses go out. Our low point, as we project it right now, is we'd be at approximately $2.5 million in the middle of March. After that, trying to get to that March 13th payroll. The 15th is a Sunday, I believe, of that month, so payroll will actually be processed on the 13th. And so really, we're looking at that $3 million as a cushion should other expenses rise, or we have a significant snowfall, or we have overtime that we're having to pay for. We got to account for those contingencies. We don't want to, not be good stewards so far, and so that's why we're recommending the $3 million. You can see we show paying it back within a month. We've put 9% interest on it. We're still working through the details of what that could be overall, but we show, at least in this cash model, paying it back within around a month. We could do a 30, 60, 90-day payback within the bank. They're open to the terms on that, but you can see once we get to that April 30th position, we're anticipating projecting $26 million reserves at that point. So any questions on any of that?
If it's a 9% loan, do you have it figured out what we will be paying in interest off the top of your head, or?
Yeah, it's the $22,500 that is on top of the principal that would be right here.
Okay, thank you.
So it's the actual percentage on the loan that's realized is less than 9%, right? 9% is an annual rate?
It would be a monthly.
It would be 1/12 of 9%.
Go ahead.
It would be 1/12 of 9%.
Okay, thanks.
Is there any, instead of a loan, are there line of credit options that banks are willing to, since we're looking at this more of a cushion and not a need, any type of line of credit that we could explore so that we don't have to pay interest unless we actually need to pull the money?
That's a great question. Our legal team we are not allowed to do a line of credit as a school district. Sort of the similar thing we can do is what's called a drawdown bond. So all of our, in this particular fund, we have to pledge our anticipated revenues. That's the only thing we can pledge for this. We can't, back a piece of property or anything that as collateral, right? So we pledge our revenues, but if we do a drawdown bond, we may not actually have to pull out of it, in which case we would pay less in interest overall. And that's how our legal team has recommended that we approach this.
How is having our fiscal year 24 and 25 audits incomplete affecting interest rates?
I think that'll be a bigger question later in the presentation.
Sorry,
but for this amount, for this short a time frame, not as bad.
Okay.
And using the projections for the expenses, I know that at the top, the date is February 13th. Given that we're on the 17th, how close are we to those projections? Like, are they pretty accurate?
I think we're in the ballpark.
We're a little behind, about $1 million, $1.5 million. We have expenses outpace anticipated when this was drafted.
So expenses are higher than the estimate?
Yes. Part of the problem with building this model was our expenditure cycles followed no predictability, and that made trying to determine expenditures very, very difficult, right? So if I plot the last 5 years of expenses onto a graph, it's meaningless trying to compare year to year. So given our lack of predictability in consumption has made it difficult to project that.
Are there any things that jump out as trends to follow, right, or to sort of focus on right now for those expenses that are outpacing projections? Or is it just?
One thing I'd offer is, of course, our staff, right? That's a more consistent number for us as we talk there. I think Alan's somewhat referencing those other object codes we looked at and just the unpredictability of those when they come in. And I think we're going to learn a lot this spring going through that process to try to limit those expenditures, that there might be an opportunity for us to better identify, what are those things and when they come in, and to try to build some kind of a better forecast for those. Of course, they still are attached to a budget. We still have an expectation of what we should spend in those areas, but just about when they flow in, I think that's what, as Alan's continued to try to dig in, just having a harder time understanding when all those bills are going to hit, even if we know the cost is coming at some point. And I think, we wouldn't have wanted to talk to you about inaccurate, incomplete data tonight and then present something that we feel like, okay, it's close here, but that we don't have some type of a buffer for that, knowing the variance in the expenses he's talking about too. That obviously this is critical for us to make sure that we deliver on the promises to our people. So again, while it shows we have a positive balance there, I think we're trying to be extra cautious right now in that scenario and make sure we could account for it.
Is there a possibility that we'll shoot too low and we'll have to come in for a meeting?
We've worked consistently with the bank over the last couple weeks, and there's no indications for that now, that would happen, Director Lingo. Of course, if we would get some kind of new piece of information or data, we would alert you guys right away to that effect. But we felt good about this $3 million projection, knowing again that what we're forecasting is actually on positive, and this is an ability to give us some type of reserve for that experience, or for that month. The next one shifts a little. Sorry, Charlie.
We're looking at a commercial loan, short-term commercial loan, and we're not considering another interfund transfer, which we might be able to.
We did consider that. That's a good question. We considered that out of potential of PEPAL and SAVE, but we have some debt service payments. Am I saying that correctly, Alan? There's some debt service payments that are due there that we don't believe PEPAL and SAVE is probably a good fund to count on for this current period to do that, but we did explore that option previously. Do you have anything else you want to add there?
Yeah, so the problem isn't necessarily PEPAL and SAVE, it's the debt service fund specifically. So the money that is housed within the Pepple and Save cash accounts are encumbered by the obligations for the debt service payment.
What does that mean?
We're required.
Sorry.
No. That's why they don't let me out of my box much. Each month, we're supposed to take a portion of that Pepple and Save revenue to cover 1/12 of principal and 1/6 of the next interest payment due. And so those funds cannot be borrowed against because they are encumbered by that bond. They have a first lien position.
So we've evaluated the least expensive source of a short-term loan that we have available and found that it's not really available. So we're going to the next
Yes.
most costly source.
Yeah, we simply don't have the liquidity in those accounts to cover an interfund loan at this time.
Okay, good, thank you.
So then a conversation that we are also working on right now that we're going to have to continue to follow up with you some more on is the need for additional borrowing and trying to estimate what that will look like for the next fiscal year. Two things we know are that, we have to repay the insurance fund, and then also that we have a shortfall in July, knowing we're really operating with no cash reserves or extremely limited cash reserves, that when we do not receive that state foundation aid payment in July, that we're going to have a problem point there. And again, back to, while we know today, right, it's not a timing issue, but if you think when the timing of those payments come in, you can tell our bottom months are months where we're going to have a much more difficult experience again, September and March, as we approach next fiscal year. So we do need to do budget reductions in conjunction with that. We are likely to see some increased federal revenues next year, but we know some of our state revenues will stay flat because we're on a lower enrollment year next year, and so we'll be on the budget guarantee to likely stabilize that. That'll be part of the process you guys engage in here in the spring, is setting that budget and going through the certified budget process as well. But we have to do both in concert, is kind of the reality point, is that we are going to need to do budget reductions, and we're also going to need some loans or a large loan to stabilize that cash position throughout the year next year. Some of you have asked me independently about the size of the cut, and I even answered that question at the board table last week, and they do work together, right? Depending on how much we borrow and the size of the cut we make, and then also considering the interest that would need to be made on the loans, all is part of the equation. I think right now what we're having a challenge doing, if we're being honest, when we kind of get to some of these action steps, is being able to accurately forecast that, because we are behind on those reconciliations, and that's an immediate action step for us, is that we have to get some accounting help in beyond Alan and his small team to get our books current. And that was a finding in the audit that we've all talked about, is to bring those books up to date so that we can accurately forecast what those revenues and expenses will look like, and then be able to move forward on the opportunity to acquire a loan. We have been working with Allers and their financial team through that. You can go ahead and flip to the next one.
Can I ask one question?
Yep.
Are we comfortable that not repaying the insurance fund till June isn't going to cause problems there? I mean,
June 30th, if we go beyond June 30th, we'll have a problem with our audit. That would be an audit finding. October 30th, it's required by law.
Right, but I mean, is there enough money there that we can, continue to pay what we need to pay?
Like cover claims?
Oh, you mean
Yes.
with the current in and
Yes,
out?
thank you.
Yeah, I mean, we've been doing that throughout the year, and so we do receive money in for premiums from
Right.
employees and from the district
Right.
side of the payment, and then we do
Right.
have claims that go out, and so we feel solid about that right now, but that, obviously not having those funds as part of the insurance fund is something we have to address.
Right.
When you gave the $5 to $6 million value for cuts, did that include or not include the potential loan payment?
It's not uninformed, Director Lingo, but it definitely lacks information, right? I mean, that's to my point about not knowing exactly where our revenues are going to land, what the exact loan payment will look like, and the interest will be on that. I think our challenge is, when kind of giving that $5 to $6 million range, is that we do need to start to actionalize some cuts that are somewhat time sensitive based on them impacting our people. And so I think when we get to those projections, you'll say, well, potentially, we could have targeted a larger cut, or, I doubt it, but we'd say a smaller cut, depending on how those things flow through. So it's not that 5 or 6 is the exact bullseye, but for a place for us to begin the conversation, because knowing that it is going to impact our people and our schools, we would definitely want to start on that conversation sooner rather than later. Sorry, that was probably a long answer to your
No,
question, but yeah.
That's honest.
So back to the issue about getting the bank reconciliation issues fixed. Do you have an estimate on when that's going to occur? And to me, that's an important step to take, because that gives us information about what our actual cash amount is.
Yeah, I think you heard some community commenters last week, Director Eastham, that talked about the urgency around that, and I would say that's our number one priority right now. We've talked to folks that have talked about an army of accountants or a team of accountants, and that's what we're working to really, and we'll be asking for your support on that has to be the most important thing that we scale up right now and that we accomplish for multiple reasons. One, because of the pressure of knowing we'll need an upcoming loan, and 2, that we've existed in this environment without complete audits, right? And so we have to be responsible for making sure that we scale that up as quickly and as fast as we can. We're working multiple angles on that. Some include retired school business officials from the state that have obviously a lot of accounting experience. Others involve private firms that could potentially provide some accountants to do the work remotely. So we're evaluating those options while also identifying some short-term structural changes with our own team that can help assist in that, or even some local individuals that we can pull in to continue to work on this until we can close the loop on it and bring in a bigger team.
Do you have any ballpark for how soon we have these additional personnel on board?
We've started some of those conversations, as the superintendent said, and we've told them that we want to bring something back to the board next Tuesday, and they've told us that if that would get approved, they could have people either literally on the ground or working with us virtually as early as next Wednesday.
And I think last week, Alan, or at least my understanding of the timeline was 18 months for all the audits. Are we able to accelerate? Is that the current?
So I can probably answer that when we get to external audits, because Molly and I have been doing some work, unless Alan has a solid answer.
I think the work that they're going to be out here doing, Matt, tell me if I'm misinterpreting the conversation I had with Chase and some of the outside consultants earlier, is to get the financials current, not necessarily audited. These are 2 separate functions. So
I think she means, could we expedite the audits if we complete the accounting work faster?
Yes.
Potentially, that would be a matter of staffing availability, but that's certainly a conversation we could have with our external auditors.
It might include an increased scope of work for
It would
the auditor.
include an increased scope of work for the auditor, but it's hard for them to provide that information without us having our end done, i.e. the accounting work needs to get done in order for them to give us information on that scope, how quickly, staff availability, and how much additional that will cost.
So just so I understand your answer, Ellen, when you say it's an increased staff, is that our internal staff, or is that an increase of like hiring additional people to come in and help, or is it both?
Are you talking for specifically the audit work or the work to get current?
The audit work, my understanding is if we get current, then maybe we can accelerate the audit work, but you said it would take an increase of staff, and I'm just curious as to, is that you all, or is it bringing in more outside people?
The bigger issue would be the outside availability for the audit firm. Now, there is 2 components to this equation, right? So either the amount of time doing field work is going to be a relatively fixed cost. The question is, if you want that field work done faster, then that will require extra staffing and additional requirements. So the question is, in part, do you want to contract that time of the team doing field work, which is the actual time completing the audit. and then trying to get the deliverables faster. But as far as doing the audit work, assuming no contraction in that schedule, I'm not sure, other than maybe some cost to expedite us around the schedule, how much of a change that would be without saying we want to reduce the time of field work. That's probably a fairly nebulous
You
answer.
guys would be receptive if we were able to do that once we accelerate the process on the reconciliations. You'd at least want to entertain that as an option, even if there was some cost. So I think we would present that to you.
Come in on a Thursday night if it's needed. I just want to get it
Just
done.
Thursday, Mitch?
No,
Not Monday, Wednesday, Friday?
Family schedule, but I mean, I will come into a meeting the day that it needs to get done to get this through.
Yeah.
Okay, can we go to the next one? So some suggested immediate next steps, and I want to caution people, or caution us all here, you know, with the understanding that this is not by any means complete, or even as we get to some of the long-term improvements next, is that we know we also need some assistance from our outside experts and what they'll tell us for some improvement steps, and that we're going to continue to learn and bring you other ideas for process improvements or structural enhancements that will assist with this. But for the time being, these are some of the things we've been able to determine, and then some thoughts for moving forward. Right now, we're working with some external financial experts. Allers has been in communication with PFM that will help us in the process of securing that larger and more long-term loan. We'll eventually need to bring in engagement to you guys for that work, because that's, of course, an additional cost. They've been in communication with them prior, but that is also something you'll probably see relatively quickly. Along the lines of accelerate the accounting work, another concept that we've heard from the financial institutions as well as the firms that we've contacted for some of this help is an interim CFO service that they may provide, whether that is an interim CFO or whether it's a school business official we'd be able to secure in the state to help either assist with this work or else just also provide a structural overview for us. That could be a very reasonable consideration for us. But again, you know, as we've emphasized a couple times, we really need to accelerate that accounting work. Development of the new system of internal controls. We talked about that a lot at the start of our conversation tonight. A couple things that we're doing already is the exec teams meeting with the financial team weekly and working to organize the work to develop a better understanding of our financial reports, to work on our hiring process. Obviously, we're approaching the spring as we're making either budget reduction recommendations to you or staffing decisions for the next year, attempting to better close the loop on that and then identify those process improvements moving forward. You know that we have posted for a chief financial officer position for the long term, that we've said we're looking for a school business official also with a CPA. And those are both posted requirements of the position. And then I think one that will be continued to kind of hear your feedback on, but a community member also kind of suggested this to us that we thought would be potentially valuable. Of course, more frequency around our financial oversight committee meetings, but a potential review of the structure, charter, and makeup of the community. We do have a lot of financial experts that are in the community that do have great familiarity with financial reporting and the construction and delivery of those financial reports, that this may be a good opportunity for us to fold the community into those conversations and make sure we have other financial eyes on the data that we are seeing. So kind of when we think through, again, back to the data that's being presented to us, that there's also other trained eyes looking at that and saying, whoa, this is wrong, or you need to be asking questions about this. And so we think that would be a reasonable thing for us to think about and consider, but we wanted to share that with you tonight too. And Chase, don't we say that's actually in the 700s, is that right?
Yes.
Where that policy would be, and so that'll be upcoming here soon for us to be able to talk about what you guys, how you would feel about that, and if that's a change we wanted to make.
So, Matt, about the SBO certification, can you tell us if that certification means that that individual is trained and experienced and knowledgeable and competent in Iowa school district financing?
Yes, that's exactly what it is. I wish I would have brought my folder down. I could have talked through a couple of the courses that are required in that additional certification and training. And so that is a special certification that is specific to Iowa School of Finance. And so that's some of the uniqueness, like when we even post for a CFO, right? If it's coming from another state, they may not have the Iowa School of Finance knowledge, but that SBO certification the districts are required to have. Even when we were on the call with the SBRC this week, as we've kept them updated with our situation, they checked in to make sure that the person we hire as the chief financial officer was going to be required to have that SBO, that person would be the one holding that. So it's a very valuable certification and training program.
I would really want to push you on finding an interim if it's going to take a while for the CFO, because one of the things that when I've talked to people in the community, they're like, yeah, I know you have an auditor. I want someone with experience in doing projections. Not just an SBO, but someone that has actually been doing it for multiple years successfully to make sure that our projections are spot on. I don't
disagree with you at all. I think, we're, like I said, up there about what that right combination of things are. That's what we wanted to hear your feedback on, Director Lingo. So that's certainly welcome feedback for us as we look for that individual. The other thing I want to offer too, probably not for the interim, knowing the timely part of the circumstance, but we'd want to invite the board and talk to you also about when we do interview for the chief financial officer, being a part of that. That isn't something we've typically done, but I think in this circumstance, it'd be good to have some kind of a community aspect to that interview of that person or persons when we are presented with some viable candidates. So that's kind of a side, but at the same time, I think that's an important one to state.
What is the timeline on the full CFO? So it's out for whatever, and then how does that typically work, Nick?
Currently, it's posted. We're working with Grundemeyer Hiring Services. We have a meeting kind of at the end of this month to kind of check where we are in regards to applicants. They give us updates each week to then determine, how aggressive we feel with that timeline. They've been in conversations with some various applicants, so we'll see. I think it could depend. One thing that's going to be a factor in all of this is also going to be just simply the availability of that person. So, that's something that's going to play into this discussion of needing someone temporarily or not. Are they able to join us immediately, like when Kurt joined us last spring, or is it a July 1 time frame because they need to fulfill some obligations in their current role? So I think that's something we'll have to pay attention to as we consider applicants and candidates.
What about the interim? How soon we'd be able to get an interim CFO?
So that's been part of our conversations, and we talked to firms this week, kind of been three-pronged. They've been immediate need, help reconciliation of the ledgers, and then also their ability to provide an interim chief financial officer. That's something they offer, and then also looking at the internal controls, and we try to prioritize how those are. Mm-hmm. It doesn't mean that those are necessarily going to come all from the same place, but this goes to Director Finch's question a little bit ago. Some of the early indications have been that could happen as early as next week. That doesn't necessarily mean that they might not back off of that as they do that work, but people have been receptive, and the organizations we've reached out to have said that they have come in and assisted organizations like ours in the past, and so they've given us positive indications that the movement, whether it's accounting support or interim, a CFO, are things that could be done in short order.
Would we approve that next Tuesday, and that's why they can start on Wednesday?
That would be our plan, our hope.
I would just say, too, that I support the idea of that interim from a sort of a crisis management perspective as well, simply because you have somebody coming in with that mindset of really doing the urgent work urgently, and then having somebody else set up to be the long-term CFO under more sort of stable, long-term kind of conditions. And I think there can be benefit to having that kind of interim to set up success for the long term.
The other thing I would add in terms of background, PFM is someone the district is actually familiar with. They're our municipal advisor, our bond counsel, and so that's why the recommendation comes from Allers. It's someone that we have worked with in the past, and so they're familiar with us as an organization and some of our financial pieces, just as way of background. So we would bring you something new for this engagement, but PFM would not be a new partner in terms of some of the work we've done as a district.
We go to the next one. So then, long-term process improvements, again, these are, as the slide ends, with really things we'll need to continue to get recommendations from external experts on, but some process changes right away, review of organizational structures, additional layers of oversight and review. We've talked about a couple ideas for that this evening. Review of the reports produced, variety of the reports reviewed and how developed. I think, a learning through this has been the multiple layers down, that the surface level or the major financial health indicators is going beyond that, asking deeper questions, more questions on those reports to better inform our conversations and our work ahead. And then review of policies and procedures related to financial oversight. We've kind of talked about that a little bit with that financial oversight committee. But there's some more in there that we'll also want to dig into with you and get your feedback on, and again, some outside feedback on. And then again, critical development of a position control system and what that looks like and how that can have an impact for us. Honestly, that's probably a short-term and a long-term one, some type of a short-term system we want to feel better about this spring, and then also what would be the ideal state for long-term.
I guess I'd like to throw in there too, the review of reports produced, just the accuracy. I mean,
Exactly.
The community speaker that gave us that nice handout that showed all those errors that were just, I didn't see them when I was looking from month to month, but we need somebody to, really look at the accuracy and how all those funds just dropped off of that one report. And I mean, somehow somebody needs to be looking at that, not just how they're developed, but how accurate they are.
And I think also a thing we're going to need to think about with you guys as we produce reports moving in the future is not just the report that was developed, how was it developed? Like to your point, Molly, about those funds dropping off.
Yeah.
Like what are all the funds? Are we sure they're all reflected? Do we have an understanding of what should be there in the first place? And so I think you're exactly right that it's not only, again, it's back to how they're developed. Like, okay, what did we use for the creation of these? What's all included? Are we making sure that it's there? There was a format change in some of those quarterly financial reports from one time. There was a lot more narrative that also explained some of the components of former quarterly financial reports. And so, again, the development, the accuracy, I think those are all especially important. And then us having an understanding about, okay, how are these produced, developed, and presented to us?
And I would add back to something that Director Williams said as well, is what's going to be useful to you as a board, and how do we present the information in a way that it's not just all there, but it's digestible in a manner that you all believe that it's going to help you make decisions or have that insight. And so I think it's those pieces as well as just because we've always done it that one way doesn't mean we have to continue to do it that way.
Right.
And what input can we take from you all about, is it month over month, or what are those different types of charts that we can show that are going to be most beneficial as we move forward?
I think that's where that external community support to our financial oversight committee could come in.
I'd agree.
And help with that.
Yeah, and then,
Credit, it was her idea.
I know, I would say.
Yeah, instead of saying a community member, I'll just say it was her good idea. So.
and under that last bullet on recommendations from external experts, certainly local community members also. But do you think there are school districts in the state that have developed an admirable approach to finance control as a school district?
Yeah, I think that would be a definite piece for us. And yes, there are school districts that we know that we could contact that are doing this to a high level, and some work we could definitely learn from them in that circumstance. Some really highly regarded CFOs in their position that have done this for a long time and have a great depth of experience that we would rely on for that. There's also professional organizations, for our financial team in the state that we could rely on too, to say what would the model look like, because I think that's a great question about, okay, what's the model we're trying to get to, and then how are we going to travel along to get there? let's go to the last one for this portion of the meeting is really just back to that schedule, just to put it back in front of you again. You can tell from what we've talked about here with a couple action steps, they're not necessarily reflected on this timeline, but things that would probably be presented to you on the 24th, we would ask for your support on. If there is an engagement opportunity that we present to you with the assistance on the accounting or the agreement with PFM and their assistance to help us secure the loan. So it's not an all-encompassing list, but I think it gives a roadmap for what we're looking at here ahead of us the next several weeks.
I'm going to go back, can you go back to that slide? We'll go back to the T's again, trust and transparency. We need those recommendations more than like 1 o'clock this afternoon like we got today's slide deck. I want them at least 48 hours myself because I work on Mondays. That would give me a Sunday to work on it, look at it. It gives the community more time, but it's also building trust that if we throw a slide deck on there within 24 hours, because that is the minimum that the state tells us that we have to do, or Ehlers did during our thing, that is not, it doesn't build trust and transparency within the community. So that's my ask, and I'll be extremely adamant about that ask if I don't see it within 48 hours.
I appreciate that. And you guys have been clear about that before, and I knew today was late. I mean, if we're being honest, we were working on it till 15 minutes before it was posted, and so I'm not trying to make an excuse there. I think it might just be a follow-up conversation with you. You know, if we get to, I mean, we're talking Friday by 4 o'clock. Today's Tuesday, so if we get to the point on Friday where we're not ready to go, we may just have to have a conversation with you that it won't happen then that week.
And have it on Sunday.
We really try not to be obstinate about it, I promise on that. But there is a heavy amount of work in front of us, and I certainly respect your concern. We can't be putting things on the agenda the day of, and so I'm just wondering how we navigate that if we do try our best, and if we don't meet that timeline, then what that follow-up looks like with you. We probably just need to have that conversation, but we will meet that.
And part of this is to move to a timeline that's more democratic, inclusive, and equitable for the community and all those who are involved. I get that people don't want to work on the weekend, but this is a 5-alarm fire, as was pointed out at our meeting a few weeks ago, that is being thrust upon the community. And we need this information to be an informed community, because I'll go back to what I've said before. The community gives to our school district, they give to our salaries, they give to everybody in this room over and over again. We owe them the slide decks more than 48 hours in advance. I've been told by at least one person on this table that Iowa City Schools expects A-game material. To me, having these kind of slide decks in a point like this the day before is not A-game material to me. And I'm trying to be as nice as possible when I say that, because and this was all due respect, Superintendent Degner, but I need to make sure that parents have the trust in our school district, and in me as a school board member, that I can get that information to them as soon as I can.
I understand and respect that. I don't disagree with you. We want to be providing that notice too, and so my apologies for where we haven't done that and when we've had things that have been attached to the agenda late. We'll do a better job of, if we're going to miss that timeline, about trying to readjust timelines with you. From a general overview perspective here, again, kind of being appreciative to your concern, Director Lingo, some of these are also suggestions, right? There's some of them that we might come back to you with some additional information about why a decision is somewhat timely or important. But if there's something, again, where, you guys can give us the feedback that, hey, this is moving too fast, or we need to slow this down by a week. I think sometimes we're our own worst enemies, that, we'd like to overpromise that we're also going to turn some things around for you, and then we aren't able to meet that goal. In this situation, it is all hands on deck, and I'd want you to know and have that understanding too, that we are treating it that way and that we are working on it that way. But if you do have feedback on this timeline, whether it's tonight or moving forward, I'm certainly open to that conversation.
One other note. I know that there are a lot of as this conversation is highlighting, a lot of balls in the air and a lot of things moving at once. One thing that I've been hearing from staff, teachers, is some lack of clarity, I guess you could say, around the impact of like immediate decisions to stop spending on certain things. And I think that there's growing concern about the impact of that on especially some activities and so on. And so I think that as much as possible, some very clear and timely communication to our staff, to our teachers about, to our coaches, to our people who are responsible for keeping kids involved in things that they've been preparing for all year, those kinds of things, like can they pay for team dinner, whatever.
Yeah,
and so I get that we're figuring that stuff out, but I want to be sure that we're taking care of those folks too as they navigate through all that.
I've received some of that feedback too, just making sure that the communication is there on, they're telling me, I've heard like this team fundraised specifically for this and they can't access the funding.
Yeah.
So.
And we're continuing to work on that as we came out of last week. And in terms of next week, we hope to be in a spot also when we post the preliminary ideas for FY27, also to provide the board a document that gives some more guidance. We put up in the deck last week about the categories that we thought that would be impacted, and so we've continued to work on that, and so to bring that back with more detail for the board. But at the same time, we're also working on operationalizing that and taking a draft out to work with our principals this week and early next week, to the point Director Hornford, to make sure they have accurate information to share with their staff. And kudos to our principals. When we've shared this information, they take it seriously. They want to help move forward too. And I think what you're hearing or seeing is that folks are trying to help. And so they've communicated some information without maybe not having all of what they need to communicate. And so it's created some of those questions and some of those things that we're still working through. And so happy to see our principals wanting to jump in and help and people understanding the gravity of what we're doing. And so just keeping that communication front and center, as you said, making sure we're getting that timely information so it's on our radar, to plan to have that to you all next week, as well as with our principals here this week and early next week.
Any other feedback on this part? Well, thank you. I think what, I wanted to try to convey this evening, of course, is message accountability for our situation, also to start to instill some confidence about how we're going to move forward to try to address it and fix it. And, that we're also open to feedback, and that we want to make sure we're getting that feedback from the people that know the most about this situation and asking for help when we need it and securing that help, and then also making sure we're being sensitive to the community feedback on that and answering those questions. So thanks for this portion. I know we have a couple other things here on the work session tonight.
Do board members have additional questions regarding anything of the presentation? So the next item is external audit and the process.
I'm sorry.
Oh, go ahead,
I don't
Charlie.
have a question so much as an observation. I really appreciate this discussion from all of us this evening. I think we've been frank, honest, and respectful. And that's a good thing, and I think that'll help us a lot as we work through these issues, which I don't think this district is exceptional in having to encounter. So I just want to say that I've enjoyed this discussion very much.
So then taking us to the external audit and process, several directors have, as well as community members, urged us to have external auditors and lay out a process. On December 9th, the organizational meeting, we did hire, as a board, external auditors. They have not started the work for the district. So essentially the audit process, and in talking to them, we can set up our expectations on how that report, how the communication is shared with the board and/or administration, where any questions, comments, or requests that come into our administration, who clearly has to provide that information, will come to the board for us to have real-time notification. Alan, you're looking at me. Okay.
Are you talking about like fieldwork requests or?
My understanding, we want to see real-time information.
No, that's fine. You're going to get a lot. No, it's fine.
Email holds a lot. So we're talking about real-time information requests.
No, that's fine.
There's usually a kickoff meeting that lays out the process once our books are up to date, and once we get more information on the cost for expedited audit, we can have them come in and talk to the board to walk through that and lay it out for not only ourselves, but for the community on what that process looks like. And Kim, I should ask, but that engagement letter that we approved, like our contract we approved December 9th, can you attach that to this agenda? So that way it's easier for the community members to find.
I can.
Any questions?
And we can't start with an external audit until
Our
the other
books are caught up, absolutely.
Right.
We can't have, unfortunately, any type of audit until our records are caught up.
And then the idea of reaching out to the state auditor?
State auditor, I have reached out, have not received concrete emails because I want it in document so I can share with the board on what a process looks like. I've just been told with county, this auditor, state auditor, our books aren't caught up. They can't do anything. Any questions? So I'm hoping to get more information on what that looks like.
So then, I'm thinking that the conversations we're likely going to continue to have about what exactly the information is that we would like to see on a monthly, whatever it is, basis, could also then inform the conversation that we eventually are able to have once we can do that kickoff of the audit process, and kind of have a sense of what we want to see from that connected to what we're going to be watching, and setting up here over the next period of time.
Yeah.
And that sounds, and also we will have, as a board, control over, or a lot of influence, say, over the kind of communication that is taking place regularly between the auditors.
When you say, you mean we see it?
Yeah, like.
And we can raise real-time questions,
Yeah.
I think it's important to recognize that the auditor's office will likely be called in, whether we ask for help or not, because it just takes 100 signatures from the community or one person, so any sort of resolution to say, hey, after we get these audits completed, we will send it in and just write just have a resolution written that says we're going to bounce it to the auditor's office to check in on it.
I think one of the things we're going to have to talk about, maybe not tonight, but, we have that board policy, if I'm correct, that, the 5 or 6 of us can't talk to legal counsel. Or we can't ask questions of legal counsel. We have to go through board
That's going to be
precedent.
next.
So, so we're going to have to figure out what our policy is going to be for this auditing firm, I think.
Yeah.
I think we all just need to be
like
on
a
the same
similar.
page.
Oh, yeah. Because the auditor's not going to talk to 7 of us.
Well, but I would assume.
It also reminds me, and different, but several years ago when the board wanted to have better visibility on the bills, and so we set up that process for the bill review. And again, not the same process, but looking at it and kind of how do we set it up so it is on that kind of ongoing basis, and what are those benchmarks, what are those touch points? To your point, Director Williams, how does it get codified in policy and procedure? But that's just what it reminds me of from a starting point of, and so we have done this before, the board has done this before, and that process has now become ingrained. And so how does it just become part of the cadence of the board?
Does that make more sense that every meeting, 2 times a month, we get an update of what the communication is between the auditor and, rather than it's real time?
I don't know, I think we want to have that conversation, Director Finch, but I was just trying to, it made me think of a process we had put in place when we wanted to try to provide more visibility on a component. So whether if it looks exactly like that, if it looks something different, that's just where my mind went about how we might be able to start crafting something out for what it looks like.
Maybe that's a valuable thing for you guys to discuss would be like, some kind of an ongoing update, whether it's, again, bi-weekly, monthly, weekly, whatever you might want there from the auditor in that regard. And then if there's a substantive update call, who would be able to join that call from our audit process. Alan probably has some thoughts that could help inform that. We could also put something together to recommend about what that would look like and see if, you like that or if you want to do something different. But we could have some conversation and see what they might recommend for an inclusion. It was probably not the first time they've run into it, I would guess. And so that would be something we could do for a follow-up conversation with you guys.
If I may,
Wait, can I just, like, a little bit what I was going to say to Jane and where my head's at is I almost want to start big,
Yeah.
right? Because we don't know what we're not getting. Do you know what? And then have an open mind about streamlining the information that we actually need.
So start with real time.
To start with just because I don't know what information I've never done an audit. Like, that's just outside of my wheelhouse of professional stuff.
Right. I guess what I'm thinking is that, is this going to create a lot, when this generates questions from the board, is that just going to create a lot of unnecessary work for our staff who should be focusing on the finances?
Yes.
So that was my concern.
Yeah.
No, and that's my concern too, because I don't want to slow down their work with my questions. But I'm also afraid if we just get an executive summary, like the quarterly financial report, we're going to be in a situation where we're missing crucial information that do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I'm not sure I feel comfortable dialing back the information that we get right.
But what about
I don't know.
What about a weekly update like we get from the superintendent?
I like that. I
Okay.
mean, I think I'm comfortable with that. But again, I want to understand like the whole, in that executive summary or somewhere, we are seeing everything they did that.
See how much it really is in the first place, and then be like, oh, there's 100 emails today.
Yeah.
Let's-
Yeah, because I don't have time to read, I know, and Alan's like, there's going to be 100 emails every day, but I don't have time. I mean, we all work other jobs, so we don't have a time to do 100 emails.
No, and the way audits tend to work is the firm will set up a portal for you where you get a list of requests and then you upload files, and then there's questions that go back and forth about different work papers and things like that. I think what might be a meaningful way to approach this is if typically when going through audits, I've had a weekly meeting with my auditors, usually towards the end of the week, just to make sure, what's our status, are we red light, green light, are we on track, are there any adjustments that we need to make to the financials, things like that. And perhaps having a member of the board sit in on those meetings. I will warn you, it's extremely technical sometimes, and I would encourage you to, feel free to ask questions either during that meeting, or we can make time to discuss the questions after the meeting if that's appropriate. But that would be a way to allow a member of the board to be apprised of what's going on with the audit, how our timeline's looking, and what the state the financials are in.
I think this also lends itself back to Director Eastom's question earlier. There are some districts, whether they're in the state or across the nation, that have even audit committees. And so what can we do to look at what are some of the better practices or best practices that other districts are utilizing, so we don't spend time trying to reinvent the wheel. I appreciated Director Finch's comment about where we need to focus our time. And so what could we see that's working in another district that maybe we could bring to you, or maybe a couple different options and say, hey, here's who we've talked to and what they seem to be successful. Would this be something we want to replicate here as a way to move this work forward? It's something that came to mind based on what Director Eastom asked a little bit earlier.
Well, so your point, Director Williams, for now, until we can establish something like that, would we want to create some type of rotating schedule with a board member or two in those calls at some point, like start with that until something more long-term can be identified?
Well, here's my point. Like, let me be very direct. I think the community expects all 7 of us to understand what is going on with the audit.
Yeah.
And I think if I get a question from a community member about an audit, and I say, well, I don't know, because I'm just getting, like, that's not an acceptable response for any of the 7 of us
Yeah.
to make. I think we owe a degree of accountability, and I respect Chase the point about, like, let's see what other school districts are doing, but other districts aren't in the situation that we're
Fair
currently in.
enough, sure, that's right.
And their board isn't in the current situation. So I think initially, again, especially because an audit is something that I personally am not familiar with, I want to make sure that I am understanding what is happening, what the workflow looks like, the information that they're getting, if they're getting timely information from us, the types of things they need that aren't, like, I feel like I need to have more information and oversight about the audit process than we normally would. And I promise, I'm not, you guys know, I'm not going to ask the auditor 4 hours of questions. Like, that's a terrible idea. That's not what I intend on doing. But I do just feel like I need more information than an executive summary.
The weekly meeting that you have, is it possible for you to generate a summary for the board and distribute that?
Probably, yeah, I mean, yes, I will need to send it through comms first, just to make sure it's legible, because I'm an accountant, not a public speaker.
But there's AI programs that
That's what I
do.
said, the auditor.
The auditor could do that, that should be part of their job.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's what I'm looking for.
Yeah.
Is that direct communication.
It's right from them.
Exactly. It should say X, Y, Z, and not additional work for Alan or somebody on his team. And we can come back and discuss, I think this is an item worth discussing at the board table to make sure that it's in front of the public as much as possible.
My one concern with us rotating through the weekly meetings is then
I-
I only
there's
go
no
once every
period.
7 weeks, and I have no idea.
It's not long,
Yeah.
it's too long.
Then the other piece, the question about board legal support. Also at that December 9th meeting was the engagement letter with Allers. And if you read the letter, I was able to run home and make copies. They're our attorney. They are not the district's attorney, or I should say the administration attorney. They are to represent the board's desire, action, walking orders. They work through administration because typically administration has the information day to day that they're requesting. But at any point in time, Molly and I can get on the phone with them, ask questions, have them provide direct information to the board. You saw Molly and I was copied on something today that came out from administration through them. That's going to be the standard going forward, except for items that will potentially end up in front of the board where we have to make a judgment on, i.e. personnel issues, student issues. We will not be copied on that. But Allers is our attorney. They have to maintain our confidentiality, meaning whatever we discuss with them, they cannot share with the administration. That does not work with the administration. Whatever they share with them, they have to tell the board.
So I know in our policies, there's a provision that only the president and maybe it's the vice president can communicate with our attorney. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Okay, so everything has to go through you,
Both of us.
both of you.
It's going to go through both Molly and I, and the reverse. So questions from us go through Molly and or I to our attorneys.
Do you know why that policy was put in place?
Because they're not going to talk to 7 different people.
And it's expensive, I mean, you can see their hourly rates.
Yes, their hourly rates are attached to
And
this.
for those that don't know, lawyers bill in 6-minute increments.
And they want to ensure that they are, they expect that I'm, myself or Molly, because we were on the same call, we're on the same call, we hear the same thing, and we're not just going rogue and saying, we want to, I don't know, create a contract with the city on XYZ, and you all don't know anything about it, because that's why it's two of us on a phone call, so we can say, that's not what the board wanted. And then they will provide communication back, because I'm waiting on something from the attorney we talked to today. She had promised the communication back to us about that conversation today.
So it's always you and Molly did?
Yeah.
Whenever you
Yep.
reach out? Okay, got it.
Any questions about that? All right. And we have our regular meeting next week, right? Or do we have a work session
Closed
before
after
that?
tonight.
No,
We have
P&G.
P&G before.
Thank you,
600.
okay. All right, and we have a couple of closed sessions tonight, so I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
Motion adjourned, or seconded?
All those in favor?